And here we go. Time for another episode of Cash's Top 5. Today, joining me, you've probably been tricked by one of his viral videos. He is not as mean as you might think he is. You know him from comedy. He's a brother of mine from way back. You know him from podcasting. He's been all over the place. You've heard him consistently on Bob and Tom here in Central Indiana. Brent Terhune, what's up, man?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Of course. One of the things we share, other than a deep reverence for George Carlin and stand-up comedy in general, both a couple of metalheads. So the top 5 today is very apropos for us.
Yeah, it's top 5 Metallica songs.
Which, by the way, I know I'm going to start to repeat myself a little bit because I feel like each week I keep saying, oh, this is the hardest one I've done. Oh, this is the hardest top 5 I've done. This one really is. We're splitting hairs just to get to a top 5. I almost said, hey, do you want to do like a top 20 instead? Because
I have 11 on my list. So we'll have some honorable mentions, but it was like on Twitter a few weeks ago, it was like one of these metal magazines or something, were like, what's your top 3 Metallica songs? And of course I was like, I couldn't decide. So I picked 3. And then I loved the other people in the comments being like, wrong. These aren't your favorites. These are your favorites.
Well, it's 3. So there are going to be some great ones that are left out. I mean, I love that. Wrong.
I know. I love when people tell me what I like and vice versa.
Yeah. In fact, this is so hard. I don't know that I could do a top 5 least favorite because I love so much of their stuff. I don't know that I could come up with 5 songs that I hate. You know what I'm saying?
It depends on I didn't even listen to the full album of Lulu. I don't know if you've listened to that with Lou Reed.
I tend to just pretend that didn't happen.
Because I listened to 2 or 3 songs, and I'm at the point in my life where, like, if it's not good in 20 minutes or 30 minutes, if I'm watching a movie, I turn it off. And that's what I did with Lou Reed and Metallica. And like, it hurts to say, cause it's my favorite band, but I'm like, I don't think this is for me. And I don't know if it's bad, but I know it's not for me.
Yeah, no, you're right. I listened to maybe 1 or 2 songs and nope, this is not how I want to envision it. It's not a fan. So that would, if we eliminated Lulu, then it really would be difficult to come up with the top 5 least favorite. But today we are doing our top 5 favorite Metallica songs ever. And I'm curious to see, because I know you, to also set the stage, I think you and I are 2 of maybe 13 or 14 people in the entire world that actually love Saint Anger.
I've seen you at the meetings. They had to put chairs away at the meetings. That's how not popular that meeting was. So
yeah, it's I don't understand the hate. I mean, I understand the people who, want to hate on the snare drum, the ping sound, but if you get past that, you get past that, it's good. But after a while, you start to really, you don't even notice anymore. It's like, no, it sounds kind of good. And there are some like remastered versions of songs, and you're missing out on some excellent riffage if you decide not to listen to it.
More offensive than the drum is the lack of guitar solos. That to me was, and even then I still love that album, but I'm also like, you've got 2 great guitar players in the band. Let's use them.
That's a good point. Although I will say that not that I don't love the solos usually coming from Kirk Hammett. But what I really love about a song, and we'll probably get to that when we start our list here in just a second, I love the James Hetfield chug of the rhythm guitar more than I love the wah from Kirk. So I was okay with the fact that there were no solos. I didn't notice it until I watched the documentary, Some Kind of Monster. They were talking about, let's not do any solos. I was like, oh yeah, I guess there aren't any solos.
I guess, yeah. And the thing is, I still think they're great songs, but I'm also like, if you listen to every other album up till then, you're like, oh, here comes a solo. But then in an 8-minute song, you're like, there's no solos in here, which again, fine. But it's just, I feel like you're doing yourself a disservice if you have those 2 guys in the band.
That's a good point. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Our top 5 favorite Metallica songs of all time. Brent Terhune, what do you have at number 5?
Number 5. And this is also a weird thing. I don't know if you're like me. I know songs, but then it becomes difficult for me to tell you what album they're from. I don't know, like, it's like it's a weird level of super fandom, and I've just kind of given up on being that guy that knows everything about everything, because I'm like, I'm good. I just like what I like. But
Yeah.
number 5, and I know this is from And Justice for All, but it's Dyer's Eve.
Okay, so that's a deep cut. I feel like that's a true Metallica fan answer. The ones that hate everything Black Album and beyond, the one that they never play in concert because it goes super hard. It's 11 minutes long or whatever it is. What do you love about that song?
It's just that it's fast, and I don't know the lyrics. You know, I'd have to re-examine them. But to me, the song's about it's kind of that. What's the other song on the Black Album? I'll have to look it up now. But it's that child versus the parents. There's a line, "Do as I say, not as I do" type thing, where the kid's rebelling, and maybe I just heard it at the right time in my life, where it was like I never even had a bad childhood or anything like that, but I'm like, yeah, parents suck. But it's just the speed of the song. There's like 3 Metallica songs. There's Dyer's Eve and Death Magnet, or My Apocalypse, and Battery, that are all super fast, even Damage Incorporated. That, like, if people are like, what's their hardest song, you could put those 4 into a category, and even parts of the song 1. But Dyer's Eve, just for me, was so fast, relentless from start to finish. I just like it.
Yeah, it's a good one, man. It's one of those, like, you think it might be an instrumental because it takes quite a while for their lyrics to come through. Because it's Dyer's Eve. What's the one it's connected to? Am I making that up?
Are you talking about To Live Is to Die?
Yeah, they are kind of connected to like their one Giganto song, and part of it is instrumental. But yeah, that's as fast and furious at not the movie franchise. That's as that's as intense as Metallica music gets. Because then that's probably why they ended up not playing it live a whole lot, is because they just couldn't do that every night.
Yeah, and it's also that, what are they, 50 now? So it's sometimes you're like, we can get that in the studio a couple times, but to do that live and also play 2 extra hours, I understand.
Yeah. Well, dude, James will be 60 in a couple years. I mean, they're getting up there, man. Yeah.
It is so weird, and it's so weird what, like, money and lack of stress, I think, will do to your body or not do to your body. You're like, oh, Springsteen's like 70 something, but you're like, that guy looks great. How's he look better than me? You know?
Yeah. Imagine what James would look like if he hadn't boozed for so hard and for so long. He would be just looking like Kirk, really. I mean, I know Kirk did a lot, but you look at him, you're like, that dude, even with the gray hair, like flawless skin, like, what's their regimen?
Yeah. You're like, maybe I should just surf more or something. I don't know.
Yeah. That $100 million makes life just a little bit easier.
I know. Yeah.
Well, it's fitting that that's your number 5, because my number 5 is in that camp as well. Just extremely heavy and fast. And it's from Master of Puppets. It's Disposable Heroes is my number 5.
Oh yeah. And that's one where I'm like, I never like put that on purpose, but when it's like, none of these, like, I turn, but that's like one that I don't seek out very often, is Disposable Heroes. Why do you like that?
Well, I don't know if you're like me, but when I was first introduced to Metallica, my brother Mark was a fan before I was, and then my uncle Phil really was the one who opened the door and introduced me to all of it. For me, I listened to the hits first. So, like, I heard For Whom the Bell Tolls, Master of Puppets, Enter Sandman, One, the huge commercial big hits that they play every single show. So I was like, oh my God. I listened to them over and over and over again. And then I finally went back through and listened to all the songs that I kept skipping to get to the ones I already knew. And when I heard Disposable Heroes for the first time, and just that, and it's got that rebellious feel to it, kind of like a Back to the Front. It's kind of military, like,
you will do what I say. Yeah.
What I say.
Yeah.
And then when it gets to the end, I was born for Dyer.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, man. Just being 13 years old and just full of piss and vinegar and hate. Again, nice upbringing, lovely parents, nice sister. No struggle really growing up, but I was just, that testosterone you feel when you're a teenage boy. there was nothing cooler than that. And just that build up and that guitar, because that was the first time I heard guitar almost as being percussive like a drum. That I'm like, oh my God, man, I don't even know how you could play something like that.
And the title is such a good title too, is Disposable Heroes. Just
Yeah.
and that's like some of these Metallica titles you hear, and you know, it's not on my top 5, but I'll say like All Nightmare Long. You're like, how did somebody not say that thing before they thought? And maybe somebody did, but you're like, how did somebody not think that before you saw that song title? You know?
Yeah, I feel like the Google search after that that they had was like, surely somebody came up with that. And so they did an extensive search to make sure it didn't exist somewhere else. And they're like, to your point, really? Nobody ever said this before?
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to take it.
Yeah, that's every good idea I've ever had. And then you search it and you're like, oh, that's already somebody's Twitter handle for 13 years. Okay. Guess I'm not that creative, I guess.
Yeah. Or you got to get those out of there so you can really appreciate the ones that are, legitimately just yours.
Yeah.
Okay. Dyer's even number 5. What do you got at number 4?
Number 4, I am a liar. It's All Nightmare Long. I got you.
Okay. But so go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Just that, again, that when I saw that title, without even hearing the lyrics or the music, I was like, man, what a great title right from the jump. And then just, going back to the hook of hunting you down all nightmare long. And then there's that point in the middle of the song where everything stops. And then you could hear like James, he's coming back into the song, but you can hear his breath. He inhales to start the song again. And then when you're singing along, you're like, oh, I got to wait for him to breathe. And then now I can jump back into the song too. I think I haven't seen the video in a long time, but I remember liking that video too.
I got to say, Death Magnetic is another, for the people that just turn Metallica off after they cut their hair or the Black Album or whenever they feel like they sold out, they're missing out on a lot of great material. And Death Magnetic, from start to finish, is an amazing album. And part of why I think I love it so much, everything, especially past Black Album, is, James blew his voice out. And so he kind of had to operatic, he does his exercises and, especially with S&M, the live concert album, he had just found a different way of singing these songs that it made it easier to sing along with. Cause you can't, Phantom Lord, like you can't do that. You're just going to lose your voice. And that is, they kind of went back to their initial heavy thrash roots with Death Magnetic, but he kept the operatic type of vocals that you could sing along with, and Nightmare Long is great. I think my favorite from that album, it's not my top 5, is probably Judas Kiss, only because the riff. That is, if we did a top 5 Metallica riffs list, which we can at some point, bow down, sell your soul to me. Like that, the first time I heard that, I was like, I don't know how they can keep coming up with this amazing material. How do they keep coming up with these amazing riffs? But Nightmare Long is great because that's one of those you can air guitar along. It's so fast. It's so good.
That's that album where like I first started to listen to Metallica, and I've heard their hits before I heard this full album, but it was Saint Anger, which is probably why I have an attachment to it, because like the first one that I heard, but then Death Magnetic was the first one that I remember it being like, it's out today. I'm going to go to Target with my friend Nate in between classes in college and buy the album, and then listen to it in his car before we had to go back to school. But it was like one of those things where you built an attachment to it that you're not going to have with, Ride the Lightning.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Which is a decent segue into my number 4 for you. If I'm being honest with myself, it could probably rank a little higher, but based on my top 5, my number 4 is For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Nice.
From Ride the Lightning. That one is definitely a fan favorite. It's not necessarily that deep of a cut. However, it was the first one I remember hearing because I was reluctant to get into Metallica. Like I said, my brother Mark was into it a little before me, and he would play it every once in a while. Like we'd be playing video games in his bedroom or whatever, and he'd turn it on. I'm like, turn this shit off, man. Like
Mhm.
I was still, this was 5th, 6th grade, so I was wanting to listen to Nelly, Country Grammar. I was wanting to listen. I loved Aerosmith growing up, so I just wanted to listen
Mhm.
to, like, Aerosmith was my rock, and I enjoyed my hip hop with, with Nelly in that late '90s, early 2000s hip hop. And then I was on the family farm with my uncle Phil in his old Ford Ranger pickup, and I was, can we listen to Aerosmith, please? And he's like, how
Mhm.
about we listen to this? And he turns on For Whom the Bell Tolls, and it's bong, bong, and I was like, you could see
Ah!
my brain split open. It's like, what is this? And I listened to it over and over and over. And so that was my initial introduction to what Metallica is and was. And it never gets old, man. That
Mhm.
lights out. The buildup of the song, that it turns the corner and then it turns another corner and then it turns
Mhm.
another corner. Oh, it just doesn't get any better than that.
And you forget that it's like a 4-minute song with 2 minutes of music. Like you forget that, like, the music is so good and the riffs are so good that you forget, like, usually I'd be like, all right, let's get to the lyrics to fast forward to any other band, but I'm like, okay, yeah, this is great, and then the lyrics like kick in and you're like, oh man, this is even better than I thought it was going to be.
Absolutely. And it it's almost like I sing along with the music.
Mm-hmm.
Like the instrumental parts, like like just doing the
Mm-hmm.
like that to me is kind of technically singing along with it, even without the lyrics. And you're right, it's almost like bonus material. Like when you finally get the lyrics to come in, you're like, oh yeah, no, this is an actual song.
Yeah.
But and just with radio being the way it is and pop music being the way it is, you just don't have those. You're not afforded those buildups as
Mm-hmm.
much. You're just into the song and it's over in 3 minutes. Like
And again,
these are
another
methodical.
great title that I don't, I think For Whom the Bell Tolls was a phrase or used in something before then, but you're just like, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and it tolls for thee. You're like, this is so cool,
Yeah. Uh, yeah, it's I don't think Hemingway ever thought that his title would be used in such a way, but I'm definitely glad that it was.
Yeah. Also,
Um,
when we're talking about these, do you have a specific version of these songs? Because there's certain ones that I'm like, oh man, and Metallica is one of those bands that they have so many live things, or every show's recorded. Like you can download the concert you were at, essentially the next week, I think. So it's like, man, you could be like, that specific version, that's the one I like the best.
you know, that's a really good point that you just raised, because I for Whom the Bell Tolls specifically, I love the studio version because the bell that they use can't really be recreated, even though they may play it over a loudspeaker. It's never as clear as it is. I love Symphony and Metallica,
Mm-hmm.
S&M. So I am a huge fan of that version of all those songs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was going to say, for my list, if we were doing covers and live versions and stuff like that, Hero of the Day from S&M would make my top 5, and Merciful Fate from Garage Inc. would make my top 5, but I limited it to just, for now, studio. But you're absolutely right. We're so nerdy, dude, that I could do it. I could do a top 5 versions of this song. I could do a top 5 versions of that song,
Mm-hmm.
because like I've got old Japanese bootlegs from my former teacher Salemi, who let me copy a bunch of stuff. So I've got those. The best live album ever is probably Live Shit Binge and Purge, Seattle, Mexico City, that night, the Black Album tour essentially, and they've got the
Mm-hmm.
Ride Justice medleys. Blows my mind every time I listen to it. And so you're right. I mean, For Whom the Bell Tolls, I love the S&M version of it. For this one, I'm going studio purposes, but
Mm-hmm.
we
Yeah,
this is going to be a 5 hour long episode.
I
I
know
can
this
already
is.
tell.
I'll do my number 3 if that's where we're at. I think we're on 3. So
Yeah, we're on number 3.
if you're done,
Yeah.
my number 3 is "Master of Puppets," the song, and that
Okay.
the one that I first heard was the S&M version, the Symphony Metallica version, but just I mean, I don't know, man. Again, another great title. Like maybe I'm a title guy where I'm like Master of Puppets. And just that, I don't know. It's such a great song that you can sing along to, and then especially live, where you're like, I've seen them a couple times, and it was Conseco Fieldhouse, but now Bankers Life, whatever it is now, where the
Mhm.
Pacers play in Indianapolis. When you see one of those stadium arena tours, I don't know if you're like me, but like it's so loud that the music moves your hair. You know what I'm saying? Where it's like, why
Yeah.
is my hair moving from the air? And it's not air, but it's the air. And just that feeling of just singing along to Master of Puppets, and lends itself to Master, just, I don't know, just a great song overall.
Yeah, for me, Master didn't make my top 5, but that's probably the Stairway to Heaven effect. I've heard it so many times because I love it so much that
Hmm.
there's a little bit of a burn factor, which isn't fair to the song. Given that criteria, it probably should still make the top 5,
Hmm.
but it's up there with Stairway to Heaven, Layla, Freebird, all those classic rock songs I've
Hmm.
heard a million times. The first time I heard it, there are a few of these songs, the first time you hear them, you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe
Hmm.
they keep topping themselves. And Master's another one of those. Now, were you appreciative when they finally started playing the whole song again in concert? Because it's a long song and there's this medley interlude in the middle where
Hmm.
James and Kirk play together. And then for a long time, 15 years on tour, they cut that part out and just kept the fast parts.
Hmm.
And then it was probably maybe the Death Magnetic tour 0809. They're like, no, we're going to play songs and we're going to play them the original version all the way through. And I'm
Hmm.
glad that they did that because that's what made those songs so great.
And that's the thing is that I can appreciate both. For me, it's probably a mood. Like I'm in the mood for the fast version of Master, and then other times I'm like, let's take the scenic route and listen to the
Take the back
long
roads.
version of Master of Puppets. And it is one of those things where, like, for me, I call it the AC/DC effect, where you're like, I've heard Back in Black 1,000 times. I've heard all the, and there again, like their music, AC/DC, is like some of the best rock, but I'm also like, it's like how you feel about Master of Puppets. I'm like, I've heard it, and that's how I feel about a lot of the songs on the Black album. That's the stuff where you're like, my mom and your mom and your grandma maybe could even be like, I know that song, and then where it's
Yeah.
like it's not just yours anymore, it's everybody's. So that's how I feel about a lot of the Master or the Black album stuff, and even that's not fair to the song because they're great, but it's just how you feel about them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, it's interesting to think that you're right, there are moms and aunts and sisters and uncles and teachers and old folks and that know the more mainstream stuff.
Hmm.
And so when you like pull out some of the old stuff and you're like, hey, if you like that, you want to play this play this older record from Metallica? Yeah, let me hear
Hmm.
it. And then they're like, nope.
No, thank you. Yeah.
They don't want any part of that heavier, faster stuff.
Hmm. It is so, yeah, but that's the thing. Is like that's why you and I can have this conversation, because otherwise it would be, Enter Sandman 5 times, which is fine.
Yeah. I just love Nothing Else Matters, just the melody of it. And I love Metallica and their love messages. Um, Going the complete opposite direction of that, my number 3 for you is the Four Horsemen from Kill 'Em
Okay.
All, the first album. Another one of those brain split wide open. I remember I heard For Whom the Bell Tolls at the farm. So I was 12 or 13. And the next week, when I went back home to Indy with my folks, we went to the store. And I don't remember where we were, but I was able to buy, it was probably like a disc replay or, one of those CD
Sam
shops.
Goody, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was able to pick up "Injustice for All," and I recognized the song one. Or oh, sorry, yeah. So I bought "Injustice for All" and I bought "Kill 'Em All." I bought both of those together, and I only recognized the song one. I didn't recognize anything from "Kill 'Em All." I just knew
Hmm.
that was a Metallica album. I'm going to buy it, and so I listened to. I put it in, and I get to the Four Horsemen. And I'm like, it sounds like horses like galloping, but it's the
Mm-hmm.
chug of an electric guitar. I couldn't believe it. Um, I just love that song. It's one of those I can't really put my finger on why. I just never get tired of it. The live version's awesome. The the studio version, the bootleg demo version from Dave Mustaine when he was still in the band, and it was called The Mechanics with an X.
Mm-hmm.
And James sounds like a little girl. His balls haven't dropped, and he's singing up here. Just such a good song.
And that, yeah, that's again another great concept for a song is the Four Horsemen, because I was raised Catholic, so I'm aware of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, or if you're a wrestling fan, the Four Horsemen with Ric Flair, like such
Yeah,
a like just a great topic for a song, and that's what I think metal in general. The metal like writers and singers are so good at just picking a topic that's already like interesting anyway, and then they make it so much cooler with the music and the lyrics and the performance.
absolutely. So we've got Dyer's Eve, we've got All Nightmare Long, we've got Master of Puppets, Brent Terhune. What's your second favorite Metallica song of all time?
My number two is One.
Okay, yeah, I see
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
did there.
And again, it's one of those where again the video doesn't hurt to uh to see, and of that story of the soldier, you know essentially no arms, no legs, can't move, and the guy just wants to die. What a story in that song. And then you get the breakdown at the end of I cannot live, I cannot die, that where it's like that part, that is Dyer's Eve in the middle of a song. you know
Yeah,
and again, and then there's so many different versions of One, but just that performance of, and maybe I don't remember which one it was, maybe it was S&M or maybe Through the Never, but it was like when he's like, please God help me die, or die, whatever, just like you feel that you're like, this dude wants to die, and like that's the worst thing ever, except in his case.
yeah. Do you have a favorite version of One? I know you mentioned a couple of the different live versions. Do you
Yeah,
have a favorite?
probably the S&M one, just because just it's already a great song, then it's enhanced with the symphony.
Oh, the cellos and the violins just going crazy, trying to
Hmm.
keep up.
Yeah.
That's one of those songs where you can't skip ahead. Like
Hmm.
you want to fast forward to get to the good part,
Hmm.
but you got to earn it. Like you got
Hmm.
to get through the little
Hmm.
the parts there. Um, because man, that's such a good song. That's
Hmm.
one of those, like, it's a fan favorite, but it's also, there's a reason for it. I mean, just like
Yeah.
Master, there's a reason why it's like the Stairway to Heaven of Metallica. They just love it.
Yeah. And that's like when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, these aren't necessarily the deepest cuts, but I'm also like, it's not surface level cut either. It's like middle of the road. And but again, like you said, there's a reason that people like One.
Yeah, it puts you in a headspace to where you appreciate it. It takes you on a journey. I know that may seem a little weird to say when it comes to such angry angry music, but it really does. um and I'll get into this in a little bit, but just the fact that they were so young when they wrote these lyrics and made
Hmm.
these arrangements, it blows my mind.
Hmm.
um which
It's
that leads go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's like when you look at the Beatles' career, essentially it was 10 years, and you're like, I don't remember how old they were, but it was like either 20 to 30 years old, and you're like, man, that guy was like writing about concepts that you have when you're 30 or 40. Like you feel, just love concepts in general, that now your grandpa at 80's like, this is music, and you're like, that guy was 22 when he wrote that.
Yeah, like the Four Horsemen, like pestilence, famine,
Hmm.
and you're like 83, you're 20 years old writing these incredibly complex lyrics and music scenarios. It blows my mind that they're able to do that.
And your main drive at that time was getting drunk and getting laid. Like that's such a juxtaposition of let me get laid, but also pestilence, famine. Like
I'm clearly well read, but I've got some faces to melt first.
I got urges.
My number 2 for you to recap, I've got Disposable Heroes at number 5, For Whom the Bell Tolls, The Four Horsemen at 3. That's funny. I've got 4 at 3 and you've got 1 at 2. My number 2 for you is also from Injustice for All. It is Blackened.
Mm-hmm.
Best intro of a song, in my opinion. I mean, one, you can make an argument for sure has a great with the the army sound effects, but Blackened, I don't even know what instrument that is, if it's guitar, but it's just this cool mystical sounding siren-y type thing, and then like it just launches into it. There's something about that riff when it leads up to the Blackened is the the live version. I think it's Osaka, Japan, on the Madly in Anger tour.
Okay.
So that's like 03 maybe, is the best version of that. I've sifted through lots and lots of versions, live versions of these songs. That's as good as it gets. Just between the intro and the build up and then the payoff, the lyrics talking about Mother Earth. And again, these are angry young dudes pissed off and singing about very complex, deep social issues, military industrial complex and Mother Earth and what we need to do to save her and all that stuff. It's so good.
And I remember, I think it was hearing James on Rogan or one of those things where it was also made, he's almost 60 now and a millionaire many times over, doesn't need a thing. And I think it was Rogan or whoever was interviewing was like, how are you still mad? How are you still angry? And it's kind of like what you and I both said, great childhoods, nothing wrong. And we're like, yes, like just that feeling of, I don't know, anger towards anything or aggression, but it's not, I know you're a nice dude. It's like, there's no reason for any of this, but still we're attracted to this type of music.
Yeah. I don't know if there's, part of it is we're both, comedians. You have stuck more with the comedy career than I have. I've become more of a dabbler than I have been more professional doing stand-up and whatnot. But there's a darkness to comedy. People that are good at comedy, and you are extremely talented and very funny, one of the funniest guys I know. There's a darkness that comes to comedy, and there's a reason why we're attracted to the darkness a little bit. Like I said, I don't know if I said this before we started recording, but we're both huge George Carlin fans. My number one comedian going away, he's, probably one of the main reasons I got into doing stand-up, because I wanted to just continue what he did. And again, there's a darkness there that just kind of attracts inside our brains. And that same level of darkness that, thank God, James Hetfield was able to link up with Lars and they were able to do what they did, because we get to appreciate this art that they've put out for so long.
Yeah. Pestilence. Famine.
Feel good stuff, man.
Yeah.
So, okay. We've got Dyer's Eve, All Nightmare Long, Master of Puppets, 1. I have a guess for what your number 1 is. We'll see if I'm right or not. What's your favorite Metallica song of all time?
My number 1 is Creeping Death.
I knew it. I was right. I knew it. It's such a good song, man. Tell me about it.
And specifically the live shit binge and purge, I think is maybe Mexico City, but the one where Jason Newsted takes over in part of the song. And it's such I like Rob Trujillo, but I miss those live versions of Jason Newsted with his backing vocals, because I think he brought something to the band that Rob and Kirk just don't have. I don't know, not even lyrically, but singing wise, that backup vocal, I love that version. And just that, die, die, like that. Again, another song that lends itself to being performed live because it's such an audience participation of maybe not throw your hands in the air if you don't care type thing, but it's like chant
Yeah.
the word die with me.
Yeah, man. I was just talking about this the other day. I'm teaching now, and I've just noticed with high school students, it's tough. And it's not just high school students. I think it's people in general. It's tough to get people excited about anything right now, especially right now with, social issues being at the forefront and COVID-19. And I don't remember being this politically, you know, divided in this country. Um, but it's tough to get people psyched about stuff. People, they're just zeroed in on their phone and they're distracted, and it's nothing but, I feel like we've turned into drones. But I still remember, because I've seen Metallica 4 times now live. And I remember from the first time I saw him to the last time, just a couple of years ago, it's everybody in the audience, men, women, kids, older, younger, doesn't matter. Die, die. And they do throw up the horns and they get into it. And it's just so cool to see people get amped for something and to let themselves go for something that, not necessarily the most uplifting message. Die.
Yeah, die.
But it's just so cool. It's that level of community that it's interesting too, because listening to Metallica, you always feel like, oh, this is mine. This is precious to me. And then you realize there are millions of Metallica fans. You're like, how is this possible? This is my band.
Yeah.
There's
and then your grandma's like, I like that song. Come on. Like, I don't like my song, Grandma.
Yeah. So yeah, incredible list. Creeping Death would have been my 5B or my number 6. It just didn't make the list. And mainly for the reason you said, that live version is just so great. And if we're talking riffs, I mean, all time great.
Yeah. And I didn't even talk about the story of the Pharaoh, the story of essentially, I think, Exodus. I'm a bad former Catholic or good former Catholic. I don't know how you would describe it, but just that when I, sitting in religion class and high school, and I'm like, oh yeah, there's that song Creeping Death. And we're talking about that stuff right now. Like, the guy, you got to leave Egypt before your firstborn son's dead or whatever. And you're like, wow, they made a song out of this. And I think I brought it into my religion teacher. I was like, Mr. Crosley, did you know about this song? And he's like, yeah, I know about that. But it's like, you can't play Creeping Death for kids. You can only talk about it out of a religion book.
Yeah, you got to scare them a different way.
Yeah.
You can't do it with music.
Yeah.
Well, my number 1 for you is along that same vein. I've got Disposable Heroes, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Four Horsemen, Blackened is number 2. My number 1 for you, very close to your number 1 on the album, Ride the Lightning. My number 1 is Fade to Black. There's a deep connection I have with that song. It's about suicide and the thoughts of loneliness and sadness. And, there are times, again, going back to the comedy thing, there are dark sides to everybody. Everybody's kind of has their issues that they deal with. And I've had issues in the past where I'm glad that music was there for me to get through those dark times. And just, again, incredible to me that they were 21 when they wrote these lyrics, and the profoundness that they still have today from being recorded 35 plus years ago. Fade to Black, again, one of those you want to get to the good part because it gets really rocking there towards the end, but it's the acoustic start. Some dumbasses think that's when Metallica sold out, is the acoustic guitar at the beginning of Fade to Black. That's when, they're no longer thrash. They sold out. They put an acoustic guitar on their song. But that buildup is just incredible. And that's the one song for sure I don't know how they play. Maybe Master of Puppets because of how fast they go and how intricate that is. But I'm like, how the hell do you do that? Just incredible.
And that, like, it's like you said with, it's dark thoughts. And that's part of, I think, great art makes you feel not alone, whether it is comedy. with a dumb joke where you're like, yeah, we all do that, and we can laugh about that. Or Metallica about everybody's had a suicidal thought, whether not even like, oh, I want to die, but it's like, what if I did that? And then thankfully, you don't do that. But it's also like, man, they feel the same way I do, so it lessens it somehow to be like, oh, I'm not alone, and how I have come to this dark spot. But then thankfully, sometimes they pull you out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Anything not quite make the list? Obviously, we love a lot of Metallica. Is there one
Yeah.
that really hurt to leave off, but you just had to?
Well, like I said, I had 11, top 11, which is, most lists are 11.
Yeah.
One of them was the S&M version of Outlaw Torn.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Just a great, great long song anyway, but it's, just put with the symphony and the performance.
Have you heard S&M 2 version of Outlaw Torn?
I saw that. I don't know. Did you get to see that in the theater?
I did not get to see it in the theater, no,
Yeah.
but I have seen the DVD version of it now.
And that I still, again, I'm so much more attached to S&M 1, but S&M 2 was good, and I need more time with it. Even though I've seen it twice, I think.
Yeah, the thing I liked about S&M 2 with Outlaw Torn is they turned up the guitar at the end, whereas Outlaw Torn on S&M 1, I feel like was turned down a little too much. It's still really, really good, but that like James comes in, I feel like they knew that it was down a little too much on S&M 1 because they cranked it to 11.
Yeah.
Like, we're getting the guitar on this one for sure.
And the other thing was that you get the backing vocals once again from Jason Newsted of "Hear Me, See Me," that where it's like, I don't know, something about his vocals that's just like, man, you hear him and you're like, man, it's so much better.
That's a really good point. That's true. That really makes that song. Anything else that didn't quite make your list?
Yeah, the Unnamed Feeling from Saint Anger, and I also have the song Saint Anger. Again, I understand why people don't like those, but I like them a lot. Like Saint Anger, I remember seeing that on MTV, and of course I was aware of Metallica, but I hadn't heard that. It was, that new sound you've been looking for. Well, listen to this, like that Back to the Future scene where I'm like, oh God, like how many bass drums does Lars have in that? Like, it's 2, but it's also, I didn't know you could do that. And then it's like at a certain point in that song, it's a bunch of noise, and that's what I needed at that point. I was like, I need a bunch of noise. And that's what it was that, Unnamed Feeling, Saint Anger. And then a recent one was Halo on Fire. That might be my favorite one from the new album is Halo on Fire.
I think that's my favorite off of Hardwired to Self-Destruct as well. Ronnie Rising medley on there where it's just a bunch of cool riffs back to back to back. I love that one too. Man, there's just so much good stuff.
And Halo on Fire, what a great visual of, I can see in my head some guy just sitting there and then boom, a Halo on Fire, ring of fire just pops up above his head. I'm like, man, what a great image to write about.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like with that album, they had really cool concept videos that went along with, oh man, what's my favorite? This is gonna piss me off if I can't think of it. The Bone. Spit Out the Bone.
Spit Out the Bone. Yeah.
Man, the riffing on that song is incredible. And that video is awesome. It's got like the badass hot ninja chick.
I don't think I've seen that one before. It's so weird how like I can be attached to some of this music and be like, yeah, I never saw that thing before. Like, how do I not know about that, but I know about this?
Yeah. I'll send it to you when we're done here because that's a badass video and it's a really, really good song. And then, just didn't quite make it again. I kept it kind of classic, I guess, for lack of a better term. But No Leaf Clover from S&M is.
Have they normally done that song live? Because I've not seen it on a bunch of stuff besides S&M.
They don't do it often, no. I don't believe, especially in the other live one, Minus Human,
Mhm.
where they're like, we'll never have a studio version of this.
Mhm.
And I don't think that they do it live very often. I
Mhm.
found a Wikipedia page few years back where they're keeping a running total of how many times they've played every song.
Mhm.
And it's like Master of Puppets is up at the very top because it's played every single show, no matter what. It's up in the,
Mhm.
five figures of how many times they've played it. And then down here, like Dyer's Eve and Escape from Ride the Lightning, it's
Mhm.
like seven. They never ever play it.
Yeah.
That's one of those where it's kind of rare, I believe.
Mhm.
Although they did play it in Indy in 2004. My
Okay.
first Metallica concert with my uncle Phil. We were up on the stage,
Mhm.
not on the stage, but belly on the barricade right next to it. He got a high five from James
Nice.
Hetfield, and he got a high five from Sully Erna, lead singer of Godsmack. I'm
Yeah.
like, couldn't
You and
believe
I were
it.
at the same. That was I think my first concert. It was either that or a Leonard Skinner concert, but I'm going to count Metallica as my first. But
Of course.
uh, that's such a great show because I wasn't even like a Godsmack fan, and then I left that show being a Godsmack fan. If nothing else, for like the 10-minute drum solo jam thing, where I was like, "Oh, this is so awesome!"
I
Like,
talk about that all the time where they're battling and then they flip their sticks to each other, catch them in
mhm.
unison, and go right back into it.
Yeah.
The coolest thing. And then I think that was the show Rob Trujillo. He'd been in Metallica for like all of a cup of coffee at that point.
Mhm.
He'd spin in circle, and when he spun, the bass would come up, and so he would play it as he spun because it would like
Yeah.
kept with him parallel to the ground. That was pretty badass too.
Yeah. What a great show. And it's weird, like you and I have never, I don't think, ever talked about that show, but we shared that same moment. And again, how do we not know about this till right now?
Well, that's the beauty of podcasting, Brent.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, excellent top five. We could nerd out on this metal forever. We'll go ahead and call it there. Now, you are everywhere. You've gone viral several times, at Brent Terhune on lots of things. Cameo, your podcasting, your touring, hopefully starting back up with
Yeah.
precautions in place. Where can people find you? Where's all your stuff?
BrentComedy.com has the links to everything. But if you want to follow me at youtube.com/Brent Terhune, I do a bunch of political stuff, but then also I do the complete opposite and never mention it in a lot of videos. So if you don't like political stuff or vice versa, all of my videos pretty much are on YouTube. And I just had a tribute to Mitch Hedberg, one of my favorite comedians. So I just put that up there. So yeah, I'm trying to put out stuff daily, but you know as well as I do, trying to create things is difficult. So, but everything is at my YouTube.
Awesome. Well, dude, thank you so much for doing the show. I'm sure we'll do another one. We'll talk to you soon, Brent.
Thanks, man.